Okay, Dad. I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like every time we have a conversation, the world's getting a little bit crazier.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not just you. Well,
Okay.
I've noticed that that's been the case for the last several years. It seems to me. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been getting crazier for a while, but it just um, the, it's getting crazier at a faster and faster pace.
Right.
You
Is
know,
the
that's
wheels
just.
going to fall off this car anytime soon? Like,
I think maybe one has already fallen off, and yeah, the other three will fall off soon.
okay, yeah. So there's so many crazy things we have to think about which crazy thing to talk about first. So we can talk about the breaking news of Israel killing a top Iranian general by bombing him in Syria,
Right.
and we can also follow up with the what's happening right now with the investigation in the Crocus terrorist attack. Both of those, I think, have huge implications for
Right.
what will happen just in the world, pushing us closer to World War III. Which one do you want to tackle first?
Let's. Why don't we talk about Iran? I mean, that just happened. Yeah, I saw that just a couple
Okay,
hours
I
ago.
know very little bit about it. I just saw
Right.
the headline, read a few paragraphs. So,
Right.
what happened, and
Well, from
why is this important?
okay. Well, first of all, it was a missile fired apparently by an F-35 jet from over Israel.
To one of our jets.
Yeah, one of our jets, right? That struck a military headquarters building in Damascus that was used by Iranian forces, and it destroyed that building.
Now, were these Iranian forces were they sanctioned, allowed to be here
Oh
by
yeah,
the
they're
Syrian government?
sure.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were there legally at the invitation of the Syrian government, and they, at least five were killed. Uh, one was the chief of Iranian forces for Syria and Lebanon. So that would include that would include territory where Hezbollah is stationed.
Mm.
And the second was the chief of staff for the same territory. So really, the number one and two men for that area, that very
Hmm.
important area. And this is the highest level officer assassinated by Israel or the U.S. since Soleimani, when he, back when Trump, what was it, in 2015,
Right.
approximately.
I
Yeah,
remember when that would
yeah,
happened.
right. Soleimani was, yeah, even he was like the number two man in Iran. It was, I mean, it's a huge. That was just imagine having the vice
Well,
president killed or something
could
in
you
our
quickly
country.
tell us the justification for it? Because from what I remember, Soleimani was kind of leading the fight against ISIS. So what was our
Right.
justification for?
Well, yeah, I think it was he was supposed to have been involved. They accused him of having been involved in attacks on American forces, or it's again, they don't, just like recently. We remember when what was it, the three U.S. soldiers were killed right
Right.
there at the
At Jordan, Syria,
Jordan.
Tower 22 or something
Exactly
like that.
right, right, exactly the Jordan-Syria border right there. It was claimed that the attack was carried out by Iranian proxies, and that's sort of a catch-all term for these different militias that are in some way allied by allied with Iran, or maybe to some extent supported by them.
Hmm.
But I think it's an overstatement to say that there are proxies. That Iran simply just issues the orders and they do, they execute them. There's really no evidence of that. There's no reason to believe that. But that's kind of a standard accusation, and I believe that that's what the same accusation that was made in reference to the Soleimani killing. Um, I think it's just they saw an opportunity to do it, and there's always people um, within every administration, that are, and in the permanent bureaucracy, that are hate Iran and want to provoke a war with Iran. So in this one case,
Why should we hate Iran so much? Has Iran done
well,
anything to America?
yeah, well, okay, there is okay. In this case, I mean, in 1979. Iran, the Iranian Revolution took place. The Shah of Iran was overthrown. He was our guy, and around the same time, or not soon there, or soon thereafter, the U.S. embassy in Tehran was seized, and the embassy staff were held as hostages for something like 444 days, if I remember correctly. In fact, they were released immediately after Reagan took office.
And so we've just been holding a grudge?
Yeah, so that was considered a national humiliation. And so there is that. But again, we're talking about 1980. This is better than 40 years ago. So it does seem rather excessive. And in that time, we've imposed, really severe sanctions on this country. The U.S. and Israel have been behind all kinds of attacks, on their infrastructure and assassinations of scientists and so on and so forth. So that, again, it does seem like a bit much to say, okay, yeah, payback time, what would have been back then 35, 36 years after, in the meantime, we've paid them back many times. I don't think that really is it. I mean, that there was real anger at Iran going, back in the 80s and through the 90s, but that's roughly 40 years ago now.
It's the main reason because Israel doesn't like Iran?
It's Israel, yeah. I think it's just clearly Israel, because Israel regards Iran as a threat, because Iran has, unlike a lot of these other, Iran, of course, is not Arab, but a lot of these Arab governments have made their peace with Israel, sometimes openly, like in the case of Jordan, Egypt, or secretly, like in the case of Saudi Arabia. And they don't really give a damn about the Palestinians. They have to at least voice concern because their people, still are concerned to see them as brethren, are being persecuted by Israel. But the governments really don't care. But one of the few governments in the area that has been consistent supporter of Palestine is Iran. And for them, it's been a matter of principle. And so, first of all, yes, they will not let the issue die away. And then, second, they are a major power. Within that part of the world, they are the most powerful country. They have the most powerful military and large population. I mean, they've
technologically advanced.
Technologically advanced. I mean, you have to say that they are. I mean, they've developed hypersonic missiles. So I've heard, and they have. In any case, like after the Soleimani assassination, they fired missiles at American bases. I mean, this was a retaliation, and the Americans knew that it was coming. They were careful just to strike every one of these bases, not strike the barracks. It was clear they didn't want mass casualties to result, but it was really a symbolic retaliation. And it was a symbolic retaliation that showed, their anger, but also showed the force that they had, the accuracy of their missiles. And with that strike, they put the U.S. on notice that if we ever do retaliate against you, like if you attack us, we have the ability to destroy, every single base that you have in this region. So anyway, Israel regards them as a major threat. This is a major rival. And so they've, the one other major rival was Iraq, but now Iraq has been conveniently destroyed by the U.S. invasion. And I think, as a lot of people have pointed out, that probably that invasion wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for supporters of Israel and the government. They saw it as a chance to knock out another rival of Israel. And so, that's because, of course, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. But there were people there always looking for a chance, and they got Iraq, and then the focus shifted to Iran. Okay, that's the next one. And it looked like, back in the George W. Bush days, there was a point where he was ready to do it, but actually our own CIA kind of pulled the rug from under him and said that, oh no, they're not developing nuclear weapons. And but there's just there's this constant drumbeat, there's this constant pressure. Other people there are always looking for an opportunity to attack Iran. And I think that, it really comes from Israel.
Okay, so we killed Soleimani. Iran showed that they have very advanced military capabilities.
Right.
And then I believe Trump got on the phone and tried to smooth things over. And I guess he did, because that was the end of it. what's going to happen this time?
Right.
So
I think
Israel
they
killed.
right.
Or, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So well, now Israel killed somebody that we can say maybe not quite as high as Soleimani, but very high up, a top
Right.
general.
Right.
This is like some of them are Lloyd Austin equivalent, essentially, right?
Yeah, maybe not quite that, but like a yeah.
But one of the top generals,
yeah,
okay,
right,
maybe
right.
not the top, but number
Right.
two or whatever. So what are we looking at here? Is this something? Do you think that Iran has shown that it has force, that it will now take
Yeah.
actual action? Because this was an attack on their base in the capital city of Syria, where they were legally sanctioned to be on the invitation of the Syrian government. Can Israel just? I mean, no, they've been bombing Syria for a while, but can they just bomb Damascus like this?
Well,
and
they've been doing it for years, and it's just and they often are targeting Iranian officers, forces within Syria.
So it's just a question of how far can they push the envelope before
Right.
there's a retaliation, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I think that Iran understands that that's what they're pushing for. They want a retaliation. Enough something so that to give Israel an excuse to attack Hezbollah, for example, who is a close ally of Iran. And again, this particular general was very close to. So that may have been the point. It was just maybe getting Hezbollah to strike, or they would rather have them strike first and then be able to claim that their invasion of Lebanon is defense. I think that's probably what's behind it. But Iran understands this, and they really have. That they have to be outraged. They must be chomping at the bit. But they've always actually shown, proven to the world that they have cool heads. They wait, and
We don't.
Yeah, not all. Right. But part of the reason for that is that, at least in the past, we were such a powerful party. We could do these crazy things, and we didn't really suffer consequences. I mean, you can invade a country and just smash up that country, and then you just walk away, right? And well, it's a country's problem; it's not yours. And you have a compliant media to kind of pick up the pieces and say, well, we achieved something, and it was complicated, and now let's think about something else. But Iran doesn't have that luxury. They are the weaker party. Maybe not between them and Israel, but if you look at the U.S., who is clearly there to back Israel, and they know that there are that very powerful faction within the U.S. government that's always looking for an excuse to have war with Iran, and they're careful not to give them that excuse. So they may just have to suffer this and just wait for some time in the future where they can pay him back.
So you think there won't be any type of retaliation? You think
Well, there may be.
Hezbollah will show restraint? Well, so
I don't. Well,
it's a big event.
Yeah, it is right. I can't say that they won't. I just think, it seems to me likely, just looking at the way that Iran has handled similar incidents in the past. It wasn't too long ago that at Soleimani's, it wasn't his funeral, but it was like the second year anniversary, or I can't remember. It was an anniversary of his death. There was a lot of great numbers, of Iranians gathered at his grave, and a terrorist group took advantage of that situation to set off a bomb that killed hundreds of people there, and it was, everybody believes that Israel was behind it. When we say
everybody, we're just
say not everybody, because of course not the U.S. media, but the Iranians. That's the important thing. The Iranians believe that Israel is behind.
Do they have any evidence? I mean, just the fact that Israel's been doing this,
right?
Stuff
and they have
before.
a motive. Yeah, I mean, there's just a history of provocations. I don't know if they had evidence for that particular case, or if they're just saying, okay, well, this is we've seen things like this before. It's a constant, thing. But they didn't retaliate, and I mean that was, you'd have to say, as great a provocation. You think the horror of it. And again, mourners being killed at this anniversary event. But again, they said, well, this is not the time you can think, this. They understand again that the reason for these attacks is to provoke them into some kind of action. Israel wants to. They want to lay a trap for them.
But eventually they will be provoked. I mean, it's just like with Russia. They said no, Russia's not going to invade Ukraine. We kept on crossing red line after red line. Kept on. Pushing them, and finally they did it, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, they did it!" And I don't think anybody saw it coming. Very respected people like Matt Taibbi was saying, "There's no way that they're going to do it."
I didn't think it was,
and you didn't think but it happened. So I'm wondering if we're kind of having the same scenario.
You could be right. You could be right. It's just that we see that they've kept their cool, but there may be some point where they say enough is enough, and we just have to fight.
Right, so it's just pushing, and that's what I feel like. We just keep on. Israel is going to keep on pushing and pushing until they get that retaliation. But maybe they push so far that it will be hard to get support from the rest of the world.
Yeah, especially in the current circumstances.
I mean, even in the United States, I just saw it was trending. I don't know if you saw this trending on Twitter, on X, is Tel Aviv, because there's all these demonstrations in New York, protests to bomb Tel Aviv. From people that are just Americans that are outraged. We're supposed to be the strongest ally, and it's eroding so quickly here. So it's just like, at some point, how much support will we be able to give to Israel if they keep on carrying this out? And maybe that's what kind of the long game Iran and Hezbollah are playing, is just they know that Israel's becoming a pariah state. They're committing these atrocities, and Iran and Hezbollah, Iran keeps on turning the other cheek. And, it's just very difficult to do, but in the long run, you might think that,
Well, that's the thing, is that, in the long run, I think it does look very bad for Israel. I mean, it really does. But in the short run, they still, in spite of the fact that a lot of young people, including young Jews in this country, are turning against Israel, the establishment is still very firmly, just fervently, supportive of Zionism. They're still, and that shows no sign. It's been put under strain, but it's still, there's just very, very few have broken ranks. You hear of the occasional State Department employee that resigns in protest. That's
I saw one yesterday.
That's meaningful. I mean, it shows that there really is strain, but still the State Department is run by Anthony Blinken and is solidly behind Israel. And, it's just that just the power elite of this country is just solidly behind Israel. So Iran knows that, and they know that Israel is a nuclear power, and so even if they say, well, in the long run, things are looking good for us, maybe still this is not the time, to engage them in a war. But,
so basically we just turned up the heat a bit more with this attack. It's just another ratchet, and at some point the dam's going to burst, right?
I think it's it can't go on forever. It's just at some point, exactly.
Israel won't stop. They're going to keep. That doesn't seem like they have any intention to. I also heard Netanyahu just announced that he's approved an operation into Rafah. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I think I also saw that they destroyed the last hospital in Gaza.
It's horrible footage that I've seen. Just children burned, corpses just...
Right. It was just a horrifying massacre, and they... what can you say? That's also a clear signal that Israel has no intention to cave into the pressure that's being put on them. They clearly don't. They're gonna go ahead with their plans, and they're gonna...
So what other forces are at play to try to constrain? The job of the United States, I feel like, was always to constrain Israel, like we would say. But it seems like Biden is just incapable of doing it. Would it be fair to say that he's been the worst at this compared to any other president? Other presidents will allow him to be like, hey, no, you're going too far.
Well, it's been a steady progression. I mean, really. Of course, I think I mentioned Eisenhower. He put the end to that Suez escapade. He just said, "You're not doing this, guys," and it was over. Then even like under Reagan in the 1980s, I understand that Israel pulled back in Lebanon under pressure from Reagan. I mean, Reagan was known as being leaning strongly in support of Israel, but still, he.
I feel like Israel feels like this is their last chance. With public opinion, global public opinion destroying, they feel like we got to do this now. We got to do it quick, or else we may not be able to.
Right.
And especially with this might be the only president in the White House that is so incompetent that we could get away with doing whatever we want, and a State Department that's also behind us.
Right. Though the outlook isn't good. If Trump becomes elected, I don't think there's going to be any serious change.
Or RFK
policy.
even, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
But you just wonder how much influence the United States will have, power to protect Israel. I think that, we've talked about this before. If they do carry out it, that we could be complicit in genocide.
Right. Well, we already are.
Right. This case there, they said the ICJ already said that there's a plausible case for genocide. This is moving forward.
Right.
And countries in Europe have, some of them, like Norway, I believe, and the Netherlands, have halted sending equipment and military equipment to Israel because they said, look, we know that it looks like this is genocide, and we could be in trouble for this. We could be complicit. Right. So even the Western European countries are recognizing it. Yeah. So what does this mean for the United States? Are we just going to have... What's going to happen to us? It's a big question, I know, but I got to think about what's happening in Russia and here in the Middle East.
Right. Well, currently, without a doubt, the United States has suffered. Its reputation has suffered greatly as a result of both the Ukraine war and the Gaza war. And the longer they continue to support Israel, if they support them throughout, the Rafah atrocities that seem to be, underway right now, that's going to be, just another black mark, and it's going to be another that too will increase the U.S.'s isolation. There's just a great deal of inertia. There still are there is the establishment in the U.S. and in the Western governments, and these people seem to be incapable of actually doing a real 180, really saying enough is enough. Okay, we're not supporting the Zionist project anymore. I mean, it's just like, it seems like they all made an oath. It's just, we support Israel, unconditionally. And these people seem to be incapable of really changing their minds.
Could it be possible that other countries could sanction us? We always sanction other countries. Right. But I mean, if you think about it, just realistically, people say, America, you've gone way off course here. We're not doing business with you. And if you think about it, we don't make anything here in this country anymore. All we do is export our dollars around the world. Right. Already people are protesting in terms of de-dollarization. We're not going to hold as many reserves. But if China just all of a sudden said, you know what, we're not sending you any more spoons. Walmart, sorry, you're in trouble. Then what are we going to do? The shelves will be empty. We couldn't do anything. We would have to change policy immediately. Yeah. Is it possible that other countries would start to put pressure, not necessarily maybe full-on trade embargoes, but something like that, some type of... because how much leverage do we have? Our leverage was the dollar that's being eroded rapidly.
But it's still still the world's reserve currency.
Yeah, but
we still have a lot of power there.
Right, still power, but it's eroding, I think, quickly. And like what we said, one of the biggest things about the Russia-Ukraine war isn't so much the military part. It was the fact that, I always used to tell my econ students that the number one power of the United States wasn't our military. It was our economic power, the ability to place economic sanctions and cripple people and do whatever. And like you said, we pointed that loaded gun of economic sanctions at Russia, and it misfired. Nothing happened. Right. It was a complete dud. Right. So they said that right there might have been one of the single biggest events that just changed the whole course of the world, and everybody's seeing it. Right. And then the other part that the Ukraine war is also exposing is the military. That all of our weapons, Ukraine is getting destroyed. All of our weapon systems we send over just get destroyed quickly, and we're seeing the capabilities of the Russian weapons that we've never seen before. Because I think prior to this war, Russia wasn't really involved in that much conflicts. They were doing some stuff in Syria with their air force, but we didn't see their ability of these like Zircon missiles, these hypersonic missiles hitting
Right.
things so precisely
Right. Well, that, of
that
course,
there are no
very
air
good.
defense systems that can stop the Zircon missile.
Right.
Except I heard maybe the Russia's S-500.
Right.
The Russia's own air defense. So Russia has the best air defense systems. They got the most advanced hypersonic missiles. They got the largest nuclear arsenal. All of a sudden, we don't look as scary, I feel like. And you just look at the cultural unrest and political unrest in this country. There's no unification or solidarity here in the United States. So I just feel like we don't have that power, the economic sanctions and the military might. It's still scary. There's residue power. We still have power, but it's nothing like it was 3 years ago. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, I mean that we certainly are much more isolated. You know, we have been our certain weaknesses have been exposed, and again, I think it will only get worse as these wars continue. Yeah, but we still remain very dangerous. You know, we may be kind of like an old, fading tiger or something, but still, you know, we have the ability to kill.
I almost feel like I wonder, like, how powerful is our military really? I feel like it doesn't really matter how many aircraft carriers you have, or how many Bradleys or Abrams tanks you have, because at the end of the day, if one country has hypersonic missiles that you cannot shoot down, and they're producing them at a very rapid rate, none of the other stuff matters. All of our aircraft carriers will be blown out of the water. All of our destroyers will be blown out of the water.
Right.
We can't.
Well, I think we long know that those aircraft carriers are very vulnerable.
Then what do we have that is actually our nuclear arsenal? Obviously, is very scary.
Right.
But what do we have on it, and that would be used in a non-nuclear war scenario, conventional warfare, that could even go up against China or Russia or even Iran, because they have weapon capabilities that we don't.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, first of all, we do have still a very powerful Air Force, and it's supposed to be the most powerful in the world. You know, maybe that's wrong. It hasn't really been
But we
tested.
don't have a good air defense. We don't have a great air defense system, and Russia has a better one.
True.
So,
and then also one thing that we've seen, you know, like with the discussion of the F-16s, you say, okay, these are very good, very efficient, you know, fighting machines. However, they're also very fragile. You know, they have to be launched from pristine runways, and in real war, where your opponent, you know, has the ability to strike your runway with a missile, then your F-16s or F-35s
never get off the ground.
Right. Exactly. And what I understand, I think like half the F-35s are inoperable right now. So, you know, maybe it isn't as strong as we say. But I think one area where we definitely have the edge, this is being eroded somewhat, but we definitely have an edge in satellite reconnaissance. We have a lot more satellites up there than the Russians do, or the Chinese.
Does that matter so much?
Well, it does actually, because they can, I mean, these satellites just can watch everything. You know, like, so there are, I don't know how many, but there are a great number of U.S. satellites, you know, including Elon Musk's that are Starlink, you know, that are hovering over
Wouldn't you say
Ukraine.
you would get diminishing returns for each additional satellite, though? If Russia and China have 100 or a couple hundred, that's enough for them to see what they need to see.
I mean, China is starting. I mean, Russia is starting to bridge the gap. You know, they launched quite a few over the last couple of years, but at the beginning they were at a great disadvantage. Okay, the disadvantage is not as great now, but it does help. You know, it's just for surveillance, reconnaissance, and then intelligence, and then also for communications, like in Starlinks. It has given it's one reason why the Ukrainians were able to hold their own for a while, is they were helped by the U.S. Now, people have pointed out that if it was a real war between the U.S. and Russia would not hesitate to start shooting down satellites. You know, they have made a decision not to do that. They think that's just simply, would be too much of an escalation and can risk a war with the U.S. But if we were actually if it did become a U.S.-Russia war, then Russia does have the capability of...
Do we have the capability to shoot down their satellites?
I believe we do.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But then they, then the advantage is erased. You
Right,
shut
and then-
down satellites. All of those satellites are down, the ones that are applicable to the battlefield.
And then advantage Russia
Yeah.
after this, because
Right.
to me, maybe I'm wrong, but just kind of what I've just been hearing and listening, it seems like the team with the hypersonic missiles
yeah.
is going to win.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
that-
I mean, yeah. Well, I think that's one thing that's a reason for another cause of panic. I mean, there are certain things that have happened in Ukraine recently that have really tipped the battlefield strongly in favor of Russia. I mean, Russia's had the advantage, really since the beginning. Well, at the beginning, they had one. Okay, I mentioned certain disadvantages, but also the greatest disadvantage was the lack of numbers. They went in with a much smaller force than what Ukraine had at the time. But since then, that deficiency has been redressed, and now actually Russia has an advantage in numbers. But yeah, now they have these precision guided bombs, and those are just wreaking devastation. That is maybe a true game changer. That's a word that's often misused, but it really is. It now allows them to just deal, these real heavy blows against the Ukrainian fortifications that they weren't able to before. I mean, one thing is that they had this advantage in artillery and missiles and so forth, but these heavily reinforced bunkers and tunnels and so forth were still impervious. You could hit it with a bunker with 500 artillery shells, and if it's 10 feet thick concrete, they're going to still be in there, and they're going to still be shooting at you.
Right.
But if you hit it with, a 1,500 kilogram bomb, then
The whole
then
thing's
you're
gone. You just got a giant hole.
Yeah,
Nothing's left.
exactly. So now they have the ability to destroy the fortifications. They didn't have that before. And yeah, they've made advances in missiles. I mean, they have the zircons. They started off with a few Kinzels, but now they're producing, obviously there are more Kinzels coming out of the factories.
Right.
And they can shoot them in the regular.
Industrial competitive advantage is to Russia, for sure.
Yeah.
They can
Right.
outproduce us. That's
Right.
been clear.
Yeah, and they've been
So-
improving apparently the accuracy and the explosive power of these missiles. And so, and now, they've come with the zircon, which is something, again, it's just like when you realize it's going to hit you, it's too late. It's that fast, and it's launched from the sea.
I
from
heard
a
it can't
submarine.
even be detected by radar. It's got some kind of plasma coverage
Right,
for
because
it.
of the high speed at which it
Right.
travels. Right.
So you can't detect it, and we don't have anything that could come close to shooting it down.
Right.
They can be launched from nuclear submarines, which,
Right.
it seems like if you're going to invest in your Navy, it seems like the subs are the way to go.
Right.
They can be protected under the
Yeah.
water. You're not going to blow them out. These destroyers and aircraft carriers seem pretty worthless.
Right.
So, and then you have these events where you could have if a nuclear sub is outside of in the Atlantic, they could strike and destroy the
Right,
Pentagon
right.
in a matter of minutes.
Right. Well, you got to that the folks in the Pentagon are looking at this and saying, "Oops." Just like there was this pressure to attack Iran after the 3 soldiers were killed at the Jordan-Syria border there, but I think probably it was the people in the Pentagon says no, don't do it. If you do, every last base in the Middle East, every last U.S. military base in the Middle East will be destroyed. They understand that. And, they may be saying the same thing as, look, they have the ability, we can't stop these missiles. If we really go after them, they can get all our bases, every NATO base in quick order. And that's going to, make them, you think that would cause them to think twice, before
sure.
becoming involved.
For sure. Okay, let's talk about one more thing. And that's Moscow now has leveled some actual accusations towards Ukraine with regards to the Crocus City Hall attack.
Right.
They have actually named some names within Ukraine and said basically you got to hand these guys over. These are terrorists and they're involved in terrorist activities within Russia.
Right.
I don't know the fine details about it. Are you able to explain a little bit more what's happening there and the implications? I heard there was some guy that gave an interview on Ukrainian television on March 25th.
Right.
That basically admitted to terrorist attacks, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, why'd you say this?"
Right.
Some
He's
guy, I don't remember his name, Miguel or something.
Right, he's on the list, right. Yeah, well, I mean, it is clear. All you can say is that, now Russia's kind of going out on a limb. It's gone more than just suggesting, hinting at the possibility, but they're pointing a finger and naming names, and that's making it more or less official. It also makes it harder for Russia to walk away, and not escalate in some form or another, because of course Ukraine will not comply. They're not going to hand these guys over, and Russia has to know that. It just reminds me, in the past, it seemed like before every American attack on a country, they would name names, and level certain accusations. They would make conditions that they knew the other side couldn't comply with. For example, in Serbia. So anyway, I think the Russians are putting themselves in a position, or they're making it clear that they're ready for some kind of escalation. It may be that, this is how they're going to frame an invasion of the Kharkov region. A lot of people are wondering. Some people think it's going to happen. Some people, think it won't. But I think I think that probably will, and that it will be. There will be two justifications for it. One is simply the need for a buffer zone, because of all these terrorist attacks. And then the second is that as a response to the Crocus City Hall, which again is just sort of an extension of that terrorism. So it would be framed in terms of an anti-terrorist operation.
How do you think this war is going to end? And do you think it's going to end this year?
It's really hard to say. I mean, things are going faster now. I mean, the Russians over the last few months have been moving more quickly than they had, in the past. But it's still rather gradual. At the current pace, it would take many, many years before they got to the Dnieper, or at least a few years. But in wars of attrition, generally end with a collapse. I mean, you can think of it as somebody kind of chipping away at the foundation of a building. Okay, it's just the foundation is slowly being hollowed out, and as this hollowing occurs, I mean, the building is still standing. You look at it and you see this building standing. Nothing's happening, right? It's the same thing. You look at the map and say, well, this is barely budged. Maybe the building's leaning a little bit, but it's still standing there. So obviously they're not succeeding. But anybody who looks at the foundation says this building's ready to fall, and at some point it'll fall.
It'll just fall all at once.
Yeah, and I think that's how it'll be more or less. It's just that the Ukrainian forces are constantly being degraded, to the point. They used to have many reserves. Now they have very few. They have reserves to plug holes in the line to replace casualties. They still have some, but very few. And at some point, they just won't have any. And when a hole is punched in the line, there will be nothing to plug it.
So do you think that Putin will stop at the Dnieper? Is that basically where you think the new geographical line of a new map of Europe will be drawn?
It could be, but he has said things such as Odessa is a Russian city, and if we're going to permanently weaken Ukraine, probably the most effective way of doing that is to take southern Ukraine, including Nikolaev and Odessa, all the way to Transnistria. By doing so, you cut off Ukraine from the sea, especially since you've seen that Ukraine has been able to inflict a fair amount of damage on the Black Sea fleet. Say okay, we'll keep them away from the sea, and that makes Ukraine much less of a threat, and it also is going to make them forever a third-rate power. I mean, they're just going to be another Moldova, and that's all that they can be. So I think that very well may happen. They may go for Odessa, and again, Transnistria, which is a Russian enclave, right beyond Odessa. they would have an incentive to create a corridor all the way to Transnistria.
I mean, what do you think this means for the United States after Russia stops? Do you think that the U.S. is going to continue to fund Western Ukraine and try to keep some kind of Cold War, slightly hot war even going? Or are we just going to walk away? Do you think that the United States is just going to collapse internally?
Yeah,
what does this mean for us living here in America? Because
Right.
everybody in the U.S. people are too focused on P. Diddy and Taylor Swift,
Right.
and nobody's
It's
really kind of understand these tectonic shifts that are happening
Right.
across the globe. So, what's going to happen for us? What does this
Well,
mean?
it's going to be, it's going to be continuation of this trend that we've seen recently. Yet another, yet more evidence of U.S. weakness.
So,
It will be, a real serious blow to U.S. prestige. After the people who are watching the war very closely understand, actually, again, that U.S. equipment isn't performing that well and so on and so forth. But most people aren't looking closely, and they just look at the map. It's just like, again, looking at the building. It's still standing. The Russians can't do anything, and there's constantly, just all kinds of false news stories that are being spread. So even though it's admitted that Avdiivka is fallen, then you would barely notice it. There will be a news story, but if you're not following it closely and you're looking at your Google News feed, you'll just see something about those crafty, amazing Ukrainians struck another blow against a Russian oil refinery or one thing or another, and every day on a 1,000-kilometer line, there's always some kind of victory, it's where tactical victory, or a Russian tank gets destroyed or whatever. And that's the one video that they'll see. And they just have this impression, the people that kind of occasionally take a glance over there that the Ukrainians are holding their own. And, maybe it's kind of a tough slog right now, but, I'm sure once that the $61 billion will go through, they're going to.
Right.
Yeah. But
what
people
are
are looking
with that 61
yeah,
billion,
right. Yeah. Other people understand. And I think probably, again, the Pentagon understands that the situation is much more dire, but they're able to cover it up now. But when the collapse finally does occur, when the front lines collapse and then the map really changes, at that point you can't hide it anymore. And that's going to be a moment of truth. Like, is the U.S. really going to allow this huge blow to its prestige take place? Well, they may just say, well, we just have to. I mean, they stop and look at their options and realize they don't have any.
Right. Unless we go nuclear and destroy the world. Right. Yeah, I wonder how this will affect the military-industrial complex. Like, will this dismantle the MIC? Because, like we said, this is a huge blow to our prestige, but especially to the arms industry, because we used to always be the belle of the ball at every single arms expo, and everybody want to buy our weapons. Right. But who wants to buy them now?
Yeah, right. Again, I'm sure they're very nervous. One thing I noticed that, after some of these Patriot missile systems were destroyed, I think 3 of them were destroyed in quick succession. Just a few days afterwards, some stories came out about our awesome Patriot missile system and how well the Ukrainians use them or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you just had the feeling that clearly, like somebody is saying, get those stories out there. Yeah. We got to cover this up. We got to, because again, these are multi-billion-dollar systems. These are extremely expensive, and they're big money makers for the MIC here in this country. So, they're doing their best to spin things. I imagine like people who really understand what's going on, military experts in different countries know what's going on, and it's already affected them, and, it's going to affect arms sales. But there are a lot of people, there are a lot of, certainly in the American public, but I imagine, leaders of other countries that just have no understanding of these things and get their news from CNN or whatever the local version of it. You'd be amazed how much international news in a lot of U.S. allied countries is simply, just comes from U.S. media sources. They simply translate it. That's often the case in Taiwan, for example, and that's true around the world. I've heard even in Western Europe. So there are so many politicians you would think that, that they would do research and try to get the best information, but a lot of them just get their.
Well, is it the politicians that make the decision to buy the weapons, or is it would it be these military centers? Like, shouldn't it be the Pentagon or the equivalent in these other countries that makes those decisions?
Yeah,
and they surely know.
Yeah, right.
They care about.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's affecting them. I'm just imagining. I guess I'm just sort of speculating about this, but there are politicians that are probably still kind of like are consuming the same kind of news that the average American is consuming, and is still, impressed with.
Right.
Still has the same view of American military prowess.
I'm wondering if it will start to really damage our military-industrial complex, or just make it more of the money laundering machine that it already is, and not have any matter that much, because it seems like the number one purchaser of our own arms is our own government, and we print our own money to give to our military industrial complex, and they set the price for whatever they want, and we just pay it.
Right. I mean, you could say, this could be a huge wake up call, a time to reorganize, whatever. But I just, and maybe that'll happen somewhere down the road. But at the moment, you just see spin and denials and no effort to confront the reality.
Okay. Well, I think we can stop here pretty soon. I just everything seems to be heating up, both in the Middle East and in Ukraine, Russia.
Right.
I think things will be heating up here domestically as well, in terms of the economy. I think a lot of this stuff will mean it will come back to us in some way in the form of inflation, people dropping the dollar, the U.S. becoming more of a global pariah. People don't understand it or see it now, but it is going to come affect us here at home. So yeah, got to start burying gold in the backyard, buy Bitcoin, get your guns and ammo, and all that. Okay, all right, we'll end it here. Thanks a lot, Dad.